Coming up on Newsnight, we talk with the Reverend Dr. Bob Denton about his life work here in the community and about the organization he founded 40 years ago, Victim Assistance. That's next on Newsnight. This is Newsnight for November 23rd. Happy Thanksgiving. You know, Thanksgiving is the time of the year when we reflect on the blessings in our life. So it's very fitting that this week we feature a man and an organization for which so many are so grateful. If you are the victim of violent crime, or if you have an unexpected tragedy in your life, there's no one you would rather have walk that journey with you than the Reverend Dr. Bob Denton and the program he founded 40 years ago, the Victim Assistance Program. Dr. Denton, Reverend Denton, Bob, is in fact going to be stepping down from his position as Executive Director of Victim Assistance in January. And a little later on in the program, we will ask Leanne Graham to join us to tell us a little bit about herself. But in the meantime, we get a chance to talk with Reverend Denton, with Bob, about his life and what he has done. So, Bob, welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Oh, it's good to be here.
You never want to need victim assistance. But when you do, you know, there is nothing quite like your organization. So give us a snapshot of what victim assistance does.
Well, I like what you said. You never want to need it. It's kind of bad to say, you know, if we can ever help you at the end of a letter, you just don't want to say that. But the program reaches out to people who get their backs to the wall, usually in a crime or some kind of traumatic situation, and it actually goes to the scene, picks up, works with police, and then provides the help either in-house or by referral with the wonderful resources we have in this community all the way along. And we started that way, and it just grew.
Well, I want to go back, talking about starting that way. I want to go back. You have a tremendous history in this community with your family. And tell us a little bit about your father and the ministry he had and how that may have influenced and impacted your life.
Or almost didn't, because of our personalities. Now, my dad came over from England, and he did this. He was 15 years old at the turn of the century, not obviously the 1900s. He was sort of a typical British soldier's family, came over here, sink or swim. It was pretty rough, became a Christian, and and that was after he went back and fought in World War I. Came back over here and had a pretty rough life, went to a church and became a Christian, turned his life around and hit the streets to work with people. Started with boys' clubs before boys' clubs were prominent, had a halfway house for kids out of juvenile court in the 30s, camps and everything. He was not your traditional rescue mission. And not your traditional minister either. So he was a very different kind of person. A lot of fire, a lot of brimstone, but not your traditional conservative either. In fact, his best friend was Bernie Rosen, who you may remember. Sure. And Bernie could never get over this Protestant minister who, you know, supposedly was in this conservative track, and my dad wasn't his theology, but you know, who was anti-capital punishment and who would reach out and wasn't really too interested in building the church, but rather meeting people when their backs were to the wall and helping them. So that was what I grew up with, and we were nose to nose because we were a lot alike and not going in the same direction early on, which is why I said almost didn't happen.
But then your direction, tell us about your education, because the direction of your life obviously was influenced by your dad, but then based on what you did educationally.
Well, it started because my dad insisted that I have an education he didn't get. I give him great honor for that. Then I went on, got my master's at Wheaton in theology, went on, got my doctorate in social welfare, social work at Case Western Reserve. Somewhere in between there, I also went to the police academy for Akron and still carry reserve status, so that has kind of helped as we put victim assistance in law enforcement, helped as sort of I kind of gradually became the chaplain and then officially chaplain, and behind kind of where we're headed down the road.
There's a wonderful story about how victim assistance got started 40 years ago. Tell us about that.
Well, we were working with offenders, and this was the early 70s. We were in a halfway house, first halfway house, and I was living with 18 felons as a supervisor, I might add. we saw the revolving door thing. Nothing was happening. And we thought, geez, most of the guys don't really remember that they hurt somebody along the line. And so we started thinking about the victims. And two of the staff were probation. Both were supervisors. The other was Jack Cunningham, who put together community relations for Akron Police Department. So we were down at the old O'Neill sitting there saying, we just got to do something. And so on a napkin, we outlined this program. I was heading back to working on my doctorate. So around this time, I took it back up to the head of the doctoral program, and he's looking at it and he said, 75 years in the School of Social Work, we've never done anything with victims. He loved it, and he got on. That's how we started. It was almost kind of a romance to it, I guess, if you were writing a novel about it.
Because this was actually the first victim assistance program of any sort.
Nothing in Ohio. And one other, St. Louis was starting their program about the same time. And we were all like, nobody had a cookbook. Nobody had here's how to do it.
That first year, the staff was you?
Yeah.
And how many victims did you minister to at that point?
Well, geez, I think we had 103 cases. And we did some training. We brought in some volunteers and trained them. And that worked good for about a year until the next year it jumped almost 1,000 cases. And we're sitting there going, oh, this isn't going to fly this way.
All of your services that you do and provide for your victims. Explain the gamut of those services.
We, from the very beginning, thought it's most important to get to people when they're hurting the most and when it happened. And, of course, it was crimes, and then, of course, we were there for vehicular homicides, which became crimes, particularly with DUIs, and then became suicides as we do that. So, which was why we located our program right from the beginning in law enforcement. And we went to the chief at that time, and Jack Cunningham and I both talked to the chief, and he was the old kind of chief. You couldn't read his eyes. Don't play poker with him. And we'd given this presentation for 20 minutes, and we thought, well, this is not happening. So we get up, excuse ourselves, go to the door, and Chief Whedon looks, he says, I'll give you everything but a radio. So we knew right then that where it needed to be, it was anchored, and it has been. Well, then we started, tracing, and it wasn't anybody else. So we'd go out in the calls, and then if we went to court, we'd go to court or to the prosecutor's office. And as we grew, we kind of split that off to victim witness so that we had people working within the prosecutor's offices going to court, and then our advocates who were doing the crisis intervention stuff on scene. And it just kind of grew that way.
All of the services that you provide are free.
They're absolutely free.
To the victims.
And we just got to the point, and some of my board members, new ones, would come on, and particularly if they were from the business community, and they would say, well, why don't you charge? And I'm sitting there saying, wait a minute, that's not the point. They've already, not been protected by what we have said we would protect them from. Most of them are the point where, they're in demographics where they wouldn't be able to pay for this anyways, don't have insurance, and why would we get involved with plan insurance games when we don't have, that's just more book work. But the idea and principle was that this was a service. It wasn't a commodity to sell, and it's still that.
How do you get your funding?
Every way we can. Fortunately, back in the 80s, there came this Victims of Crime Act, and then the state victim assistance. So we have been funded about probably about a fifth of our budget. We have a contract with Akron, had a contract with the county, and when things got tight, by the way, we lost 2/3 of that, which was our money for matching. We do some big events like Mardi Gras, which has grown over the last 20 years, and we write grants to foundations, and there are people who contribute to it, and we're running about on a budget of about $700,000.
With a staff of how many at this point?
Full and part-time, about 17.
Okay, and they were always busy.
Always busy. And, you'll get a couple hours. For example, most of our staff are not in the office. They're over at Children's Hospital with the care unit. They're in Akron Police Department, Barberton Court and Police Department, the Sheriff's Department. We're embedded. I mean, talk about collaboration. We're probably the most collaborating agency because you don't see our staff. So they're pretty much on. But we do have staff in the office, and they'll do a lot of walk-ins. So you might get 3 hours of nothing, and then 4 families walk in all at once. All of them want civil protection orders.
Sure. Partnerships are key to what you do. So describe for our audience a couple of the partnerships that you have.
I think, began out of those partnerships, particularly with law enforcement. We're unique. I mean, talk about a partnership. A nonprofit civilian agency in the Detective Bureau, in the investigative section of a police department. This is kind of wild, and we said that is a partnership that is unique and that we treasure a great deal. And it takes certain kind of people to work in there, too. The same thing happens with partnerships with, say, Children's Hospital with the care team. So we have an advocate that does that. In addition to some of the training, we have an advocate who's been doing the temporary protection or the victim impact statements for juvenile court. We work very close with the SANE Dub program, and they do their thing. We are fortunate in this county for victim services compared to any other county in the state, because we've got Battered Women's Shelter, we've got the stuff being done in a care, we've got SANE, and we've got victim assistance, and together they are a unique kind of family.
In the 40 years that victim assistance has been so much a part of this community, how have you seen programs for victims grow exponentially, not just here, but around the country?
Well, it's interesting, because when we first started, we went and talked to one of the common pleas judges. And he said, "Oh, you're going to get blown out of the water." And then they made an aftermark. He said, "But if you survive, ripples will go across the pond." And we've seen the whole thing institutionalized, not just here, but with the National Organization for Victim Assistance, and then other organizations that are national, and 200 to 400 programs in various states, including Ohio.
You have been, it's fabulous, but you have been so instrumental in that, because were you not the first president of, was it the National Organization of Victim Assistance?
Yes, I was. We were one of 4 founders and watched that thing grow, and sort of the AMA of victim services, and went out as past president 2 years ago, once again at its 38th anniversary.
Well, what I want to do now is I'm going to continue our discussion on NewsNite.net, because I have a couple more questions I do want to ask Bob Denton.
For more NewsNite content, including extended discussions, full interviews, and the chance to speak your mind about the issues, join us online at NewsNite.net.
The person stepping into the shoes that Bob Denton has filled so ably in the past 40 years is Leanne Graham. And Leanne joins us now.
Thank you.
Leanne, tell us a little bit about your background, please.
Well, it's kind of funny. My background parallels the history of victim assistance, I feel. Growing up, I always had a desire to be in the criminal justice arena. My grandfather was a chief of police back in Massachusetts, where I'm from. My father was a superintendent, or also known as a warden, of a correctional facility. So I always had the desire to work and help offenders, and was very excited to be in the arena to help them with the rehabilitation. I decided to focus my educational career on that and follow in my father's footsteps. That led me to Ohio after I graduated from Suffolk University in Boston with a sociology degree. I then desired to obtain my master's degree in criminal justice, which I did so at Kent State. So that brought me to Ohio back in 2002.
How did you come into the victims aspect of this?
Well, still planning on working with offenders. I really wanted to get a good understanding of the crimes itself, which I got through the education, but also I felt that I needed to understand from a victim's perspective what they went through in order to help the offenders. So I actually saw an ad in the Akron Beacon Journal for a volunteer position with the Children Who Witness Violence program. So I began volunteering, and that was my first opportunity to work with children who have witnessed violence.
How did you go from that to victim assistance?
Well, funny thing, at the time that program was a grant-funded program. It was a collaboration between Victim Assistance, Battered Women's Shelter, and Children's Hospital. When they restructured, I was asked to apply for a full-time position, which I was offered, and I was asked to make the decision whether or not I wanted to be a Victim Assistance employee or a Battered Women's Shelter employee. I chose Victim Assistance.
What are your feelings about taking over the executive director of Victim Assistance from this man?
It's a pretty scary feeling. At first when I was offered the position, it's overwhelming. I mean, to follow in the footsteps of Bob, I'm just humbled, really, to be able to carry on the tradition and the history and to be involved in something so historic that he has laid the groundwork for. Mm-hmm. I'm confident because I know he has pretty much done the hard work of laying the landscape as he has shared with me, you know, get an idea of the landscape, which I have, which has been insightful.
Bob, you have been described as the right man in the right place at the right time to do the right job. Can that same thing be said for Leanne?
Oh, I think so. A little different entree this time. 2 years ago, we started looking at succession. The board did. And then they said then, well, who? And I said, you know, I think there's only one person in this county who really could, and that's Leanne. Well, that didn't do anything. So they eventually put together a group, took applications. We had 15 applications. I was not a part of that selection process, by the way, which was good. Mm-hmm. And interviewed four. Leanne was the last of the four. It was hands down. They took her unanimously. And I said, well, if you have a memory, you remember 2 years ago, I told you so. But it was smart. I did not have a choice. I mean, they did the right thing because the board is, you know, person coming in needs to know that the board is the boss, okay? Exactly. I got by with a lot because I was a founder. And that's another thing that's changed, and she's exactly the right person. She was within 2 months after she came to us where I figured anyone else would have been in 6.
What are Leanne's strengths?
I think she has this perspective. First off, she has values. Mm-hmm. Absolutely necessary. Secondly, she has experience and perspective that she sees the landscape. She understands funding. She's better than I am at dotting I's and crossing T's. And I think, you know, our treasurer is probably very pleased with that on the board. But and she really understands from the ground up. So that staff, and the staff are kind of interesting. They're taken, okay? She's been there, done that, and she's a good leader. 2 months, 2.5 months, and she's basically running most of the program right now.
Well, I had an opportunity a couple weeks ago to sit down with Mayor Pliskwalik and asked him about victim assistance, and I want our viewers to hear this too. This is what he had to say about your program.
Most importantly, it's been a real friend to people who have gone through a difficult time in their life dealing with crime, and befriending them, showing their support, having that support system that helps them not only just to be there with a face and a hand and a shoulder, but financially to be able to have people look at their circumstance and figure out how to help them through the system to assist in, probably in most people's minds, some of the most difficult times of their life, especially serious victims of crime.
Well, the mayor talked about the serious victims of crime, so I want to ask both of you individually, what is it that victims need from victim assistance?
I believe victims need someone to listen to them, listen to their needs, be patient with them. It's a long process, and it's hard to go through these victimizations. So to have an advocate that can provide the education is really what I feel that they need.
Bob?
You hit the nail on the head. You know, we have researched this over the years. We used to do research and ask everybody. We had the one open-ended question: what was the most important? And everybody said somebody cared.
Okay.
Somebody understood and noticed me.
I want to ask you both. Over the course of the years in your careers, is there one or two victims that have really touched your heart? And tell us a story about that victim, if you would, please. Bob, you first.
Oh, gee, narrowing it down, huh? Some of it didn't happen here, and some of it did happen here. I look every year at our angel tree ceremony, and I see a brother come back with a picture. When his brother was at the university and was killed by another law student at the time. I remember working that case, and I see him come back every year, and it's 20, 21 years now, and he brings the picture with him. That one.
Every year.
That does it.
Yeah. Leanne, how about you?
Well, I have worked at the battered women's shelter for the past 7 years, and during that time, there was one victim who came into shelter with nothing, absolutely nothing. No clothes, no birth certificate, no ID. She left with a U-Haul truck. We were able to provide her with furnishings for her new home, her new apartment. She had acquired a job. She left her abuser, was able to get a protection order. So that was very grateful to be able to help her move on.
A real positive story.
Yes.
Leanne, looking ahead, what are your plans for victim assistance? What do you hope to accomplish with this program?
Well, 2 months into it, it's hard to jump to have those visions. I do hope that based on the needs of the community, we're able to address those needs. Hopefully we'll be able to have advocates in other police departments other than here in Akron. I hope to enhance collaborations with other entities to make our community stronger to help the victims within our community.
What is it about this work that keeps you both moving ahead, forging ahead?
Someone needs us. You know, there's no one else out there that are providing the exact services like we do. If someone's victimized, we're there at the crime scene during chaos. It's the crucial part of their life, and we're able to extend our hand to them. I feel that that's an important need that needs to be addressed and continued.
Bob?
You know, I listen to her talk, and I know why she's number one, okay? Because, and I maybe because she's right, because I think the same thing. I don't know. But it is. I think it is. It goes back to this business of, you know, you only have one life, and you want to take or do you want to serve? And I think, you know, we're both on this. You know, you better leave more than you took.
Yeah, absolutely. Leanne, I'm going to ask you if you'd like to stay with us as we continue this last section of NewsNite. Bob, you're stepping down next month. You are going to be leaving the organization you founded 40 years ago. Tell us about what you are going to be doing in this next phase of your life.
Well, I think it's neat because, you know, people say, oh, you're retiring. No, I am not retiring. I'd die if I retired. But that's not why I'm not retiring. Over the last years, the relationship with police and now fire has grown in a counseling situation, in a relationship. 3 or 4 years ago, we had 5 deputies that were tried for murder and a variety of things. We began meeting with their families right in the midst of all the trials. And we call them prayer meetings. They were group therapy meetings. A lot of tears. But out of that came the comments from most that, you know, we need a place that's confidential, where, in fact, we can kind of, one of the officers said to get tune-ups. But officers get their backs to the wall. And so we tore apart the old mission in front of victim assistance, and cops and fire came down. I mean, we stripped it all. The Tri-County Building Trades Association took it on as their #1 project. They rebuilt it as a counseling center for police, fire, and their families, and dispatchers. And once again, it's confidential and it's free. So it's just what we do. That has grown. Last year I did almost 200 counseling sessions. We have a really good substance abuse therapist. He was up around 200. Wow. So it's growing. And that's what I'm going to focus full-time on.
And it's called the Safety Forces Chaplaincy Center.
Right.
And it's a need you are, again, going to be filling in the community.
It's a growing need. It's a confidential one. And my connection's always been with police. You know, it went through the academy. It's 42 years ago. Still carry kind of this commission with it. So that helps.
So you're coming full circle.
I'm coming full circle. Who'd have thought, you know, working with victims, and why would you ever go through the police academy? Why would you, you know, I swore him down I'd never be a minister, too, by the way. And here it is.
Looking back, Bob, can you describe the feeling of looking back over your career, over your life, and having founded an organization and had an idea that has grown this way?
Well, one's always tempted to complain. You know, and if you talk to my wife, she'd say, yeah, stop it, will you? But how many times in your life do you get the opportunity to take an idea and then make it happen and watch it grow and watch it just spread like mad? So now you get a point in your life, you're looking back and looking forward as well, but also looking back and going, geez, that was more than I bargained for.
I want to ask both of you now, going forward here, what is it that is going to ensure that victim assistance lives on? What is it that you need from the community? Because we did talk about funding to a degree, but I'd like to know a little bit more about what it is that this organization needs to go on.
I believe that the community needs to know we exist. We've been here 40 years, but I'm surprised at the number of people who may not know what we do here in Summit County. So spreading the word, letting people know that we are there to help people who are victimized of any type of crime, so they know that they can call us 24 hours a day and reach an advocate and help them with their situation.
How do you get that word out, Leanne?
Well, it's a slow process, and I think it's something we'll improve upon in the years to come. Passing out brochures.
Working with partnerships here in the community,
yes,
obviously.
Yes. Spreading the word as much as we can. Social media. Being here today, I mean, is amazing, and I want to thank you because this is exactly what we need. We need people to know what we're doing.
Bob, how about from you?
Oh, I think this is exactly it. I think people don't understand. I mean, it's kind of like, you don't put your service on the Acme bags, okay? Because I don't want to be a victim. I don't want you to remind me of that. But we're the only ones who go out, and I do this crudely. I talk about we do the blood and gut stuff because we're there on suicides when somebody isn't coming home, and we do the death notifications. We do the hard, tough work. And then we work with them and help get people back on. And we say, hey, here's what the journey is going to look like. Okay, we'll be with you. I think when people understand that, including foundations and funders, that we've really put the track down. It's good track. We build doggone good bricks without much straw. I think then perhaps, and now's maybe a good time for with the transition, for particularly those who keep the community and services alive in the community. Say, hey, we got to be more involved.
What can the general public do to help you continue this work?
Well, I think, we always looking for volunteers for certain projects and that. I think it's been the good.
And I do want to ask that because how do volunteers figure into the equation? I would think that most people have to be trained.
They do, and they are. We use a lot from the university, for example. In terms of the social work and sociology, the interns, for other special projects, like a big Mardi Gras, like the Angel Tree Ceremony, for communications, things that we're doing with a variety of groups and organizations, kind of saying, hey, here's what we do. This is where we can really use, some legs to help put that through. I think the other thing is a number of the citizens also sit on other boards and funding boards, okay? Mm-hmm. We run a $2 million program on $700,000, okay? Now, I think as funders and foundations, and we're finding this, and Leanne becomes, one of the strengths she brings is that, grant writing. As they're finding it, when we meet with them, they say, well, geez, we just didn't understand this was the case.
Didn't know it was there.
But citizens sit on those boards and say, hey, what are we doing over there? When an application comes across that foundation, you got citizens on that board saying, hey, wait a minute, I know about that organization. I know what they do. Let's do it.
Leanne, if people need to get in touch with you or victim assistance, how do they do that?
Well, we have a 24-hour hotline, which is also our office hotline number. It's 330-376-0040. We also have a website, www.victimassistanceprogram.org, pretty simple, and people can contact us either way.
Well, I can't thank you both enough for being here with us. Thank you, Bob, for 40 years of wonderful service and continuing that service. And Leanne, best of luck to you as you fill this man's footsteps. Fabulous program, and so good to have you here. And thank you for joining us on NewsNite.